My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be Eleonora Duse, Video 17, The Planning Notebook. This is my novel, Eleonora Duse, Let Me Have My Wings. But in this video, I'm going to read from the planning notebook, which I wrote while planning and writing the novel. The title of the notebook is Planning Eleonora Duse, Let Me Have My Wings, and it could be found and accessed for free on my website, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca. It begins with the idea of writing a novel on the topic of the life and career of Eleonora Duse, and ends with my conclusion a year later that the novel was now in rough draft form, which meant that every word of the novel was in place and it was time to start the polishing process. The novel is 46,000 words and the notebook is 44,000 words, so about the same length for both. In this reading, I'm going to present 5 passages from the notebook as a sample of what the Duse notebook contains. So here's the first notice, first note I made, notice to myself, note I made about the possibility of such a novel. This morning, as I was reading the skeleton rough draft of my novel Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, here it is here. So I had written that novel and was reading the rough draft. It popped into my head that I could write a trilogy of novels. Sarah Bernhardt, Eleonora Duse, Anna Pavlova. So 3 very talented divas, I guess you could say. I've read all their biographies, and that is why I thought of them as imagery for this novel, Pauline Johnson. I read about Pavlova while I was writing the ballet imagery for my 8th novel, Leni Riefenstahl, The Valley of the Shadow, and I thought of writing a Pavlova novel, but felt that there was not enough action for an outer frame, for a story. I know better how to turn information into imagery now, so I could do it now. My only questions are, number 1, when would I get time to write such novels? And number 2, what other potential novel topics would they replace? So when I think of new topics, they sound, interesting and intriguing, but well, wait, I have a whole bunch of topics already. So when would I write these? They all offer great information queries to turn into image queries. So gradually, the other 2 are unwritten, unthought of by me since then. But the Eleonora Duse topic kind of pushed its way to the forefront. So here's number 2, a second passage from the planning notebook. I want to capture this early, I wrote. In the evenings to relax, I'm reading a biography of Hemingway, which I've read 4 times over the years. It mentions that Gabriele D'Annunzio's novel, The Flame, was an influence on Hemingway's novel Across the River and Into the Trees, an item which I had ignored in earlier readings. I was intrigued that it was a story which was based on the young D'Annunzio's relationship with the aging Eleonora Duse, who's the actress without a visible life in this novel, Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am. Intrigued, I called up The Flame from Project Gutenberg and read 2 chapters last night. So I had thought of Duse, what I knew of her, which wasn't much, as an image arc in the mind of Pauline Johnson, another person who'd been on the stage and seemed to have no personal life whatsoever. And only when I came across her in a Hemingway biography, a reference to her, did I realize that, my gosh, she might be a topic for a novel all by herself. Okay, number 3 passages from this planning notebook. I have visited Venice 3 times. Turned out I'd only visited twice when I kind of checked back, 2004 and 2006. Number 1, I have read much about Venice in the wake of those visits. Number 2, I had a vague notion that I would like to write a Venice novel someday. Perhaps because I enjoyed planning and writing my Pompeii novel, Pompeii Vesuvius Dominus. But I had no story. 3, I was intrigued by the relationship between the young poet and the aging actress that I found in The Flame, this D'Annunzio novel. I read a biography of Duse many years ago, but remembered no details. Well, I didn't read a full biography, that's why I didn't know much about her. But still, she was intriguing. 5. I felt that the flame is a treasure trove of imagery. There's Venice, poet, actress, Juliet, Cassandra, the poems of D'Annunzio, which I hadn't read at that point, the plays that Duse has played in, all the great classical roles, and so on. So all those things could be utilized as imagery in our mind that are helping him to think. We think in imagery. It's the deepest level of our mind. The language of imagery is the language in which we think. So all of these were possibilities for a novel on that topic. Number 6, I get the idea that there's a relationship triangle, a young poet, an aging actress, a young singer. But I haven't read about it yet, as I hadn't at that point. But it was intriguing. 4. Whoops, I'll just flip my page here. The 4th passage from the planning notebook. I'm intrigued by a scenario whereby the actual Duse, 1, has her career to consider, 2, has a relationship with the actual D'Annunzio, 3, reads the fictional novel, 4, feels caught between the actual relationship, her career, and the import of the fictional novel. So the actual and the not-so-actual clashing, I guess you'd say, was intriguing. This last item's quite vague, but I am seeing the outer frame of the potential Duse novel as the thoughts of the actual fictional main character, Eleonora Duse, and her thoughts about the actual fictional D'Annunzio, and the inner imagery as deepening imagery which will be drawn from, number 1, her stage career, and 2, the novel that the young poet has written, which has fictionalized the relationship into what? Into a fictional poet and a fictional actress. Any more than this will have to wait until I've read The Flame, this D'Annunzio novel, in order to see what the relationship imagery gives me. So you have characters in a novel, but when those characters create other people as characters, that's interesting. But that's what we do. Everybody we know is a person whom we have a simpler picture of than the actual. So we do fictionalize other people. Okay, number 5, the 5th passage from the workbook. I see 2 things here. Number 1, topic. The possibility of the exploration of a main character whose thoughts will be very intriguing because highly complex. And number 2, imagery. A novel, The Flame, and a biography of Duse, and a literary cache, or cache, C-A-C-H-E, the classics which she's acted, as a treasure trove of available imagery. At any rate, it's an idea that occurred to me last evening out on the porch. I'm gathering source material today, as it's Sunday, a day of cooling out from my work on the Pauline Johnson Journal and my work outside in the house and grounds. Sounds very intriguing. I'll start a new planning notebook on this topic and file any further notes in that book. So that was kind of the beginning, tentative, of the whole idea of writing a novel on the topic of Eleonora Duse. So here's a conclusion, having read 5 passages from the planning notebook. A planning notebook is an attempt to harness thought. It is an attempt to simplify a new idea to the point where it is clear enough and sharp enough in the mind to allow a writer to believe that the proposed novel will be about one thing. The one essential idea that will hold the pages together and justify every word of the possibly 50,000 word image pattern, which will be the final book. Well, it turned out to be 46,000 words. It's also an attempt to explore the complexity of that single idea when it is opened up and spread out upon the table of the mind, to see all the topics that have been interesting to the writer throughout the life that he or she has been living from birth until the day that the single new idea popped into his or her mind. It's an attempt to see how all the filaments of idea that have woven their way through the thoughts and words of the novels that the writer has written up until now have led to this seemingly new single idea as a simple yet huge capacity container huge capacity container for the vast number of topics that the writer is convinced have a unity in the deepest levels of his or her mind. We spend our lives trying, I believe, to see how all of our experiences and responses to our experiences have led us to the mental state or mental plateau which we now occupy. Perhaps we think, if I can organize this jumble of ideas, I can create a concrete artifact, a novel, which will, through the medium of imagery, convey the thought-emotion complex that is my response to the life that I have been living for these many years. It is an attempt to figure out what I, the writer, actually think. Not what I think on the surface of my thoughts, which is well known to me, but what I think in the entire deep and wide consciousness, subconsciousness continuum, which is the entire thought, emotion, content, past, present, and possibly future of my mind. When the novel planning process gets underway, it's a very interesting and enjoyable journey on which to embark, and if successful, it leads to a novel, a complex pattern of emotions and ideas expressed in ink and paper, dredged up from the depths of one's mind, which one can grasp and hold in one's hand. So, here it is. Eleonora Duse, Let Me Have My Wings. Thank you for watching this video.